Today I'd like to discuss the recently signed normalization agreements between Israel and Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates. In the Middle East, peace primarily means non-belligerency. Therefore, you can have peace without normalization, but you cannot have full normalization without peaceful relations. In the case of Egypt and Jordan, a peace agreement was needed to end the state of war, but no normalization took place. This is not the case with most of the Gulf countries. Informal ties started decades ago involving academics, business, and back-channel diplomacy. For a while, Israel had low-level diplomatic representation in Oman and Qatar, as well as Morocco and Tunisia and the Maghreb. But due to the Arab economic boycott of 1945 and the ensuing 1948 War of Independence, all members of the Arab League, 22 nations, were legally considered by Israel as enemies. That's why you need peace agreements, to end the official state of war. Just as the world began to fully realize the scope and magnitude of the Holocaust, the Arab League made the most inhumane and evidently counterproductive decision to eliminate the tiny community in then Palestine of fewer than 500,000 Jews by suffocating its minuscule economy. Yet, most Arab countries, although they actively participated in the diplomatic onslaught against Israel, practiced non-belligerency. Now, analysts attach great importance to the negative regional role played by Iran as a main catalyst for this positive diplomatic development. Some see the agreements as a direct byproduct of the brewing U.S.-China tension. Once again, they say, the Middle East is being shaped by a global power struggle. Some say that the main catalyst is actually the new Trump doctrine vis-a-vis the Palestinians, rejecting the a priori demand for American even-handedness and combining it with the willingness to sanction the ongoing Palestinian intransigence. Trump's policy, they say, eliminated the traditional Palestinian veto power over normalization with Israel. Now that's all correct, but there's another reason, less discussed, and that is the rise of creativity as the most sought-after human asset. Edward de Bono, the late Sir Ken Robinson, Richard Florida, and many other luminaries, they were all correct. Human creativity is the main predictor to success in the age of technology. Nations and economies that possess the ability to nurture and cultivate creativity will perform better. In the case of Israel, it means to punch way above your weight. With only 9.2 million people, Israel has a massive footprint in all aspects of creativity, from the kitchen to the big screen to the dance floor, all the way to the laboratory. In the wake of the attacks of 9/11/2001, through a series of groundbreaking global studies, it became clear that Israel would be better off positioning itself around its creative spirit, rather than engage in the futile debate about the conflict, about who's right and who's wrong. Those who insisted that the only task at hand is to win the debate actually and practically doomed Israel to decades of severe underperformance in tourism, foreign investment, and even international goodwill. This we know. No country, no institution, and no brand can prosper by constantly highlighting its problems. And that's exactly what Israel tried to do for decades, failing to recognize the basics of marketing. And then Steve Jobs introduced the first smartphone. Historians will mark 2007 as the year that forever changed human communications. For the first time, people could self-design their own informational feed, thus eliminating the prominence of the VIPs of the old world, the editors and the gatekeepers of the mainstream media. Those who benefited from perpetuating Israel's geopolitical hardships on both sides of the conflict, by the way, especially vis-a-vis the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, those people were replaced by a kicking, vibrant, rich, and transparent conversation. The monopoly ended. Israelis themselves, even now, became the chief communicators of their country and culture. Millions of Israelis are constantly communicating their lives to their peers globally. And they do so authentically, reliably, and attractively, highlighting Israel's main strengths: its diversity, its open internal debate, and its boundless creativity. This is the main explanation as to the dramatic improvement in Israel's performance in the last 15 years when it comes to tourism, the ability to attract foreign investment, and even international goodwill. The Arab boycott is rapidly fading as Israel's neighbors, too, strive to turn their economies into hubs of creativity and knowledge. There is a new generation of young Arab leaders looking around with great concern as their oil reserves are depleting and the world is gradually shifting to a more responsible form of consumption in accordance with the principles of sustainability. They need to redesign the foundations of their economies if they want to remain competitive in the 21st century. Israel is the most immediate and natural strategic partner for regimes aspiring to adapt to the new technological realities. United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, I believe, are only the beginning. Normalization also signals the ultimate triumph of the Zionist idea, which means the call for Jewish self-determination. This must be noted, a little-known fact. Between mid-19th century until 1924, over 2 million Jews left Eastern Europe and moved to North America. This tremendous wave of newcomers shaped North American Jewry as we know it. It ended with the Johnson-Reed Immigration Act of 1924. Jewish philanthropists like the Baron Hirsch were actively involved in settling Jews in remote places such as Nova Scotia, Saskatchewan, and New Jersey. But during those 8 decades of massive Jewish immigration to North America, only a handful of Jews came to the Holy Land, including, by the way, my own family, the Aronoffs, who settled in Jerusalem in 1874. The idea of establishing a national movement for the Jewish people was not embraced by the overwhelming majority of Jews. Driven by religious fervor or by ideological and entrepreneurial zeal, and in some cases by both, those handful of pioneers acted against all odds. Their stunning historical victory was achieved thanks to their pragmatism and creativity. Today, as we all know, the State of Israel is home to the world's largest Jewish community. Jewish life, although not strife-free, is blossoming. The modern State of Israel is a bastion of creativity and innovation. Israel's universities, for example, are consistently ranked in the top tier, and ideas originating from Israel or by Israelis are considered hot commodity worldwide. Israeli content is welcomed and celebrated in Hollywood. Israel sends the third largest contingent to NASDAQ. Bottom line, a country that started with less than 600,000 residents in 1948 is projected to reach the 17 million mark by 2048. All components to assure a bright future are in place. Now, although the majority of North American Jews are still disconnected from Israel or from Jewish life for that matter, Zionism has never been more accepted among American Jews, and a new generation of young Jewish leaders is emerging. Unlike their ancestors, they see Israel as a place of opportunity and not just as a place plagued by seemingly insurmountable problems. This paradigm shift from Israel the problem to Israel the opportunity can be largely attributed to their attraction to Israel's attractive spirit. Experiential programs such as Birthright, Masa, iTrek, Jewish National Fund's Alexander Muss High School, and many similar programs allow young people to experience Israel firsthand, and during COVID-19, they do it even remotely. A prominent American broadcaster said after visiting Israel, "If only given a chance, Israel could sell itself. Nothing is stronger than experiencing the place itself." Here's another fact noticed by the leaders of the Gulf region. Israel has never been more accepted geopolitically, and Israel never enjoyed a higher level of international legitimacy. Post 9/11, Israel has been experiencing an unprecedented level of intimacy with the world's greatest powers, the United States, China, India, Russia, Brazil, Canada, Great Britain, Australia, Nigeria, Germany, and many other countries. Indeed, in some intellectual circles, Israel's very legitimacy is still being doubted. But contrary to the subjective feeling of many North American Jews, Israel is not being boycotted. On the contrary, as these normalization agreements prove, Israel's creative spirit is being celebrated globally, even in the Arab world. And as for those chronically critical intellectuals, they never endorsed Zionism, yet the movement thrived and overachieved without them. They did not support, for example, the Oslo Accords. They were not good enough for them, and so are the normalization agreements. Shimshon der Nebish, which means Samson the Clumsy, is a profound Yiddish term attributed to Israel's third prime minister, Levi Eshkol. It reflects Israel's impossible state of mind, being a victor and a victim at the same time. Understandably, victimhood awareness was an essential driver in Zionism's pre-statehood achievements. But for far too long, Israel's leaders confused the world, and their own constituents, by the way, with this dual-meaning message. One cannot passionately discuss Israel's looming annihilation and then expect investors to rush in. It just doesn't work that way. Israel's political leadership could help Israel's businesses, academia, and culture by adopting a more cohesive strategy that centers around the country's competitive advantages, chiefly its creative spirit. It seems that not only the Israelis themselves are beginning to recognize and celebrate these competitive advantages, but that its Arab neighbors are beginning to do so as well. Until next time, greetings from Israel. If you like what you see, please don't forget to subscribe.